Alright, so in this video we're going to talk about articulation. Now articulation is absolutely important as it is the reason why I was able to get job interviews at PwC, Control Risk as well as American Express. And bear in mind I was a professional football player before, I had never any type of work experience. The reason why I was able to get such job interviews and perform quite well was because of articulation. So in this video guys, I'm going to talk about the fundamentals of what articulation is, what it basically means at first principle, some of the do's and don'ts, and how you can use articulation as a tool for whether it's job application, whether just to speak more confidently and clearly, or whether it's to, navigate the complexities of life. Right, so let's talk about articulation. Now, what does articulation mean? Very often, when people talk about articulation, they're basically associated with some type of communication style or technique. Now, articulation is the way I like to put it, was quoted by Jordan Peterson really well. And basically, what he said was the more articulated a person sounds, the more educated a person sounds, and hence the more, respected or the more higher perceived the person comes across. And so what is the problem with articulation and why some people are not so articulate and what the issue is, right? So I want you to understand that firstly, articulation basically means, in very simple terms, to speak clearly and precisely. Now, the issue is that very often your brain works faster than your mouth, right? And so very often, if you're a person like myself who thinks very quickly, and probably it's because I got ADHD or whatever, and whatever other type of reasons, but when you have a lot of stuff in your mind and you're for example in that flow state, and you want to come explain or convey messages across, very often the brain just works too quick, and then you jumble up words, you stutter, you just won't sound so precise. And you can probably notice that in me sometimes, especially when I get a little bit too excited. But very often that is the case, because I want you to understand two things. The first thing is that when you think, whatever type of constellation of thought you have in your brain, I want you to understand that the way your thoughts works, the way thinking works, is basically works in webs. Right, like this is a beautiful, not so beautiful diagram right here. So basically how it works is, just imagine clusters of thoughts like scattered throughout your brain. And so basically what happens is, when a thought comes across, it basically just grabs a sequence of pattern that would eventually formulate that one singular thought. And now the problem is, even though your thinking happens in so-called like patterns or webs, as you can see it here, language and speaking is very linear, right? Because think about it, like one word comes after the other, right? You don't speak like 5, 6, 7 words, random words at once. You have to speak in a sequence, right? It has to go in a linear fashion where one word needs to lead to the next word, right? And so this is a linear diagram, as you can see a line. And so a very basic, example of a linear language or sentence is, my name is Julian and I went to the park today. So it's a very like logical sequence, as you can follow word by word. So the second issue when people are not articulated enough is there's just no structure, right? You just basically like have, no type of context of what the topic you're trying to talk about. Um, um, yes, sorry, basically you do not have any type of structure, meaning that the topic that you're trying to talk about is just out of context, right? And so what that means is, like, very often like people would talk about a specific topic, but they don't follow like a specific like sets of sequences, right? So what that means is just imagine like I'm talking about, I don't know, apples, and then like instead of like talking about like how green the apple is, like I would just basically like describe things that just doesn't make sense, like, oh, the apple is like came from a tree and then it fell and then the farmer picked it up. Like, it's just illogical and it's completely out of context and it doesn't make sense, right? Now the second thing is filler words, right? So filler words is basically what I just did about a minute ago or half a minute ago, where like I kind of get lost in the train of thought. And so what happens is, when I get lost in the train of thought, like very often people out of natural occurrences would say like or yeah, or okay, or like completely like blur out, which was basically what just happened in a few moments ago. And so there's nothing wrong, with like inserting filler words during the gaps, but most importantly is to obviously, one, continue the sequence of when you're speaking, but number two, as I just a few moments ago, like if you get stuck, just fully reset and restart the sentence so that it makes sense again. And very often, probably like yourself right now, the audience will forget about that specific small error, and then the context or the words that come after makes more sense as we go on. Now think while talking. Now this is coming back to the idea of no structure. Now very often, like if you talk about a specific topic, have you been in a situation before when you talk about a specific topic and suddenly like you kind of forgot what the question was about or what the topic was about, and then you have to like re-ask your friend or the speaker like, oh, excuse me, sorry, what was the question, what was the topic about? And so the reason this happens is because like you think while you are talking, right? And so like, for example, if I would talk a specific topic, I'll just start like saying a few words, and while I'm talking, like my mind just subconsciously thinks about like the topic itself, and then I just reevaluate and readjust my my answer, for example, and then like my entire like language, speech, and then the entire communication goes a bit off, and then after like a few seconds, I'm like, hang on, like what was I talking about? And so that's basically the issue, and this is something that we want to avoid, right? And I'll explain you guys in just a moment on how that works. But I want you to understand that articulation, as I mentioned in the introduction, is nothing more than thinking clearly, right? Because if you are thinking clearly, you are able to convey the message precisely and accurately, right? And so what is the secret weapon? The secret weapon here is specificity, or to specify, right? And so when you are speaking, right, when you are talking about a specific topic, very often, and that's a very natural phenomena, I do this myself very often, we talk about things that are overgeneralized, things that are very broad, things that are, like the bigger picture. And yes, for example, like that works, this communication style works in social events, or if you, I don't know, talking about a wide range of domains. But like if you want to think clearly and if you want to sound articulate, your phrasing of words and the way you deliver your speech has to be specific to the bolts and nuts, if that's even a phrase. You have to be as specific as the word can possibly be. And so as a fun fact, like if you study the German language, I'm by the way half German, then if you like engineer like the way the German language works, then you understand that the language itself, like the words itself, is like fundamentally constructed in such a way that the word itself is like very, very specific. Like this is where perhaps language and culture like comes into play. But like for example, the Malay language or the Malaysian language, like words are very like often broad in terms of its context, right? But in the German language, like words are like highly specific. And again, this is perhaps a culture factor, but let's not go off topic. Let's talk about the solution, right? So if you want to be more articulated, here's a few things you can do. The first thing you want to do is think first before talking. Before you click off, or before like you shut down this video because this was very cliche. A lot of people, again including myself, get this wrong very, very often. And that's mainly because, of many reasons. Maybe like one, you're very excited, about the topic, and you just want to say whatever comes to your mind. But like, you need to think literally about what you are going to say next, right? And so if you are put in a spot, for example in social settings, where you need to give a response right away, your brain thinks very quickly, right? It doesn't like think in a few minutes. You don't have to sit down for like 5 minutes just to think about what you're going to say in the next few seconds. You can pause for like 2 to 3 seconds just to like think about the topic or how you want to answer. And very often that pause of 2 to 3 seconds is actually quite often a power effect, right? Like, it makes you, like, one, it makes you look like you're actually very attentive and listening, and number two, it just gives you that power effect of whatever word comes after a long pause. Like, it'll just carry more value to it, right? And so now the second thing is, know your point before, right? And so again, this comes to the first point, but like, the way you know your point before is, obviously you need to be well versed and you need to be knowledgeable about the domain and topic. Now, you don't have to know like every type of specific information that exists out there in the world, but like, you can always do a little bit of research, let's say before you go to an event, before you go to an interview, before you meet a specific person, before you talk about your boss. Listen, man, you need to know your stuff. Like literally, like, it's and like, you don't need to sit down half an hour just to like know your stuff. You can do a very quick research, right? Or a quick like knowledge accumulation about a specific topic. Very quickly you can just figure out, okay, this is what this is about. And so that, like, in tonight's event, when I meet the person, at least I know roughly what he's going to talk about. Last but not least, bottom line up front. And so I like this because this is very effective if you're working to 9 to 5. This is the same strategy I used during my PwC interview. And so what does bottom line up front means? What it means is basically like, if somebody asks you a question, you start with the answer first, and then you stretch it by, implementing generalized examples or other types of topics that basically would surround the answer. For example, right? Let's say someone asks, okay, Julian, like, what did you do this weekend that was so interesting, right? Now, the way I would answer is, according to the bottom line up front, I'll say, honestly, man, the weekend was amazing, right? So that gives you the direct answer. Okay, his weekend was amazing. And then you follow up. Yeah, so I went to the ice skating ring and I bought a few ice cream. I fell down a few times. And then the entire story, then all the other stuff that is overgeneralized and not directly related to the topic comes into the picture. And so that's how you essentially like answer, by like leading with the answer first. Okay? And so if you still don't understand, the solution, it's okay. Like, it also took me a long time to understand it. But like, here are a few frameworks for you to remember, and you can really practice this, right? The first one is the problem cause solution, PCS, I like to call it. Whenever you have, some type of question or conversation, start with the problem, right? A problem is perhaps a specific pain point, a specific, like, I don't know, issue. And so why you start with the problem is because humans fundamentally associate themselves with problems and pain points, right? If there is something in common between you and the speaker, the person you're talking to, then very often it would be a problem or pain point, right? And then what happens afterwards, then you talk about the cause, and from there you talk about the solution, right? And so I'll give you a very simple example. Like, somebody asked me, like, hey, Julian, like have you seen like the latest interest hikes from the central bank? And by the way, I have like no flipping clue what that is about. But I'll say, yeah, I saw that. It's quite an issue because it's very high, right? So I'll start with the problem, and then the cause would be like, oh, now I'm gonna like struggle finding, like, I don't know, a loan from a bank to pay my mortgage, right? It's just an example. Again, I'm not most well versed in this entire topic. And then from there I'll provide a solution saying, oh, then it's fine, I'll just find another bank where I'll have like similar or more attractive interest rates. I mean, I hope this example makes sense, like contextually speaking, but like my point is, like, you understand the specific sequence, the specific framework that I'm using, right? Now the second one, which is perhaps more specific and more technical, is the prep framework. We have the point, we have the reason, we have the example, and then the point again. Let me give you an example. Right, I'm talking with someone and he asked me, hey man, like, how's it going with you and your girlfriend? Right, weird example, but whatever. Then I'll start with the point, with the pain. With the point. I start by saying, like, hey man, like, honestly, it's great. Like, me and her, we're on good terms and it's going really well. Right, that's my point. And then my reason is, oh well, because like we would talk out the problems, we don't fight, argue a lot, we would sit down and discuss about things. That would be the reason. And then the example is, for example, that one time, like, we had a minor misunderstanding regarding like where we wanted to have dinner. And then coming back to the point again, I would say something like, however, like, both of us are like, again, on good terms because we're able to actually communicate effectively, sit down and go through the problems rather than running away from it. And so that is basically like these two frameworks you can literally start right now. And I hope that by understanding, it's been quite a long video, I think, but by understanding like everything I tried to explain today, you hopefully get more articulated, because again, articulation not only helps you like to communicate in general, but articulation is the reason why I'm able to get interviewed by the best companies out there. And that's just communication, right? Because as Jordan Peterson mentioned, like, the more articulated you sound, literally the more educated you sound, right? And so that's what you want to that's what you want to come across as, right? Because especially if you want to apply for jobs or companies that like are quite prestigious, they're looking for people that are very articulated. But anyways, to cut it short, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want more videos like this, just like and subscribe. It means everything to me. But if not, I'll see you in the next video.